My name is Claire Whitman. I am 34 years old, and I am standing in the middle of the second-floor banquet hall of the Langham Chicago. Microphone in my right hand, left hand resting on the laptop that holds every piece of evidence it took me 7 weeks to gather. Behind me, the LED screen is projecting the face of my mother-in-law, Eleanor Whitman, in a secretly recorded video from her study. She stares directly at Lily Mercer and says, "Let Claire keep thinking she's still the legitimate wife for a few more months. Once we've stripped away all the assets and left her with nothing, Lily will take her place as the real wife." The entire room falls silent. 137 guests sit frozen beneath the golden light of my 10th wedding anniversary celebration with Nathan Whitman. Nathan stands beside the 3-tiered wedding cake, face drained white, lips parted, but unable to produce a single sound. Lily, introduced for the past 3 years as a distant cousin on his mother's side, sits in the front row in a champagne satin dress that Eleanor personally selected for her. The ice in Lily's glass clinks softly against the crystal, just a small sound, but in that moment it rings like the crack of shattering bone, and every drop of color drains from her face. But to understand why I am standing there, before a room full of lawyers, doctors, philanthropists, and distinguished Whitman family relatives, I must take you back 7 weeks, to our home in Evanston, Illinois. It was a Tuesday morning at 6:38 a.m. when I picked up my husband's still damp bath towel and smelled another woman's perfume, along with several long honey-brown strands of hair that were decidedly not mine. Mine is jet black. And the most devastating part wasn't that Nathan was having an affair. The most devastating part was that his entire family had been preparing his replacement for a long time, and they were methodically plotting to leave me destitute and drive me out of the house, like a live-in maid of 10 years with no name, no title, no rights. Before that day, my life looked nearly flawless from the outside. I was the chief operating officer of an interior design firm in Chicago, with a beautiful home, a lawyer husband, and in-laws prominent enough to reframe every insult as advice. But I was no saint of a wife. I controlled Nathan too tightly. I once pressured him into turning down a position in New York because I didn't want to leave Chicago, and I had secretly checked his emails after suspecting he was hiding a failed investment. I had my faults. I was overly controlling, always clouded by suspicion toward him. And perhaps Nathan used those very thorns to convince himself that betraying me was something he deserved to do. Eleanor Whitman was not the type of mother-in-law who acted in haste. She calculated each small move with painstaking precision. She was far more dangerous than that. She controlled the Whitman Family Trust, had connections to the board of St. Augustine Hospital, and was the one who had placed Nathan at the law firm of Harrison, Bell, and Rowe. She wasn't just a mother-in-law. She was the keeper of money, reputation, careers, and the master key to every door in that family. Lily Mercer appeared 3 years earlier at Eleanor's birthday party in Lake Forest. She was 28, with honey-brown hair, gray-blue eyes, and a slight frame that seemed designed to make men want to protect her. Eleanor introduced Lily as a distant cousin from Kentucky who had recently moved to Chicago after losing her job. I believed it. Or, more precisely, I wanted to believe it, because I was still trying to earn Eleanor's approval. The first sign was a navy mug in Nathan's study, printed with the words, "You always come back to what feels like home." He said a client left it behind. 3 days later, I saw Lily post a story on her personal page, hand wrapped around the exact same mug. The second sign was the chicken soup. Lily asked me for the recipe to Nathan's favorite dish, then, a week later, cooked that exact dish in my kitchen and said, right in front of Eleanor, "I just want Nate to feel at home." Truly revolting and nauseating. That night, I walked past the second-floor hallway and heard Nathan's voice behind the sitting room door. "Don't. She's still awake. Wait until she's asleep." Immediately after came Lily's breath, short and trembling. Then the sound of floorboards creaking once beneath the weight of someone stepping back. The blood in my body went cold from my throat to my chest. I wanted to be sick, but couldn't. My throat only convulsed in dry spasms, as if my body were trying to push the truth out. Tuesday morning, 6:38 a.m. I found Nathan's gray towel still damp on the rack. The scent of Joe Malone peony and blush suede hit me square in the face. The exact fragrance Eleanor had once bought for Lily because it was youthful but still refined. But the towel wasn't the evidence. It was only the first piece, and I was going to spend every day collecting the rest. 36 minutes later, I uncovered a truth. A deleted message from 3:14 a.m. in which my mother-in-law referred to me using exactly 2 words, the obstacle. That message was not in Nathan's phone. It was in an old iPad he had left forgotten in his desk drawer, still synced to iCloud but no longer showing notifications. I opened it with our old shared password, 0417, our wedding anniversary. Bitterly ironic. The man who wanted to erase me from his life was still using our wedding date as his secret key. The message had been deleted from the iPhone, but remained trapped in the sync folder. Eleanor had texted Nathan. Don't let Claire get suspicious. She's an obstacle, but still useful until the property paperwork is finalized. Nathan had replied 2 minutes and 19 seconds later. Lily is getting impatient. Talk to her, Mom. I read that exchange over and over until the tips of my fingers went numb. I did not cry. I took screenshots. I forwarded copies to a newly created email account named cw.archive.713, then deleted the login history. My mind at that moment was completely empty, as if I could no longer remember anything at all. There was only a dry, flat mechanical sound, cold as a hospital printer spitting out test results. I understood that I could not afford to be a grieving wife. From that second on, I had to be resolute, to gather evidence, to expose them all. I began with the security cameras. Our Nest Cam system recorded nearly every corner of the house, except the bedroom and bathroom. On the night I had heard Nathan behind the door, the second-floor hallway camera lost signal for exactly 47 seconds, from 12:21:38 a.m. to 12:22:25 a.m. The device history showed someone had disconnected it via Nathan's phone app, but the Wi-Fi router still held its log. Lily's device reconnected at exactly 12:22:31 a.m. Then came Google Calendar. Nathan had a meeting listed as client prep the previous Thursday from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m., but the location history showed his phone was not at the office. It had stopped at the Roby Hotel, Wicker Park. A receipt in the spam folder listed room 614, total $308.60, charged to a secondary company card, with a room service note, 1 sparkling water, 1 chamomile tea, 2 robes requested. I thought that was the most nauseating thing I'd find. It wasn't. In a hidden photo album on the iPad, I found a wedding photo of me and Nathan. Lily had saved it, but my face had been crudely cropped out of the frame. Only Nathan remained in his tuxedo, standing alone before a white floral arch, as though I had never existed on my own wedding day. I sat before the screen until the blue light burned my eyes raw, like sandpaper dragged across them. Every click opened another shredded piece of this marriage. Then I found the final file, an 18-minute and 6-second screen recording, 3.7 gigabytes, saved by mistake in Nathan's meeting folder. The file name, Family Transition, Draft Notes. In that file, I heard Lily's voice first. She was not crying. She was not fragile. She spoke in a low, composed tone. I don't want to wait another year. She still stands ahead of me in every family photo. Then Eleanor's voice came from the background, steady to the point of pathology. You have to be patient. A woman like Claire doesn't get pushed out by scandal. She has to be made to leave on her own. That sentence twisted my stomach until I couldn't breathe. Not from pain, from revulsion. So all those times Eleanor said I was too tense, too cold, too difficult to live with. Those weren't observations. They were a campaign. They didn't just want Nathan to leave me. They wanted me to believe that I myself was the reason I was being replaced, and to drift away on my own, worn down to nothing. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the black screen. My face was still my face, but my eyes were different. I knew that if I caused a scene at that moment, they would erase everything. If I confronted them, they would call me paranoid. If I cried, they would use my tears as evidence that I had lost control. So I opened a new folder on an external hard drive and named it Project Glasshouse. Then I began saving every piece of evidence, every second of camera footage, every receipt, every spoken word. Not for a divorce, not to plead for the truth, but so that one day, when they believed I was still sleeping, I would turn on every light in front of everyone. That evening, I cooked the braised short ribs Nathan loved most, the kitchen filled with the scent of red wine, rosemary, roasted garlic, and beef simmering slowly in a cast iron pot. From the outside, I looked like a wife trying to save her marriage with dinner. But beneath the dish towels in the bottom drawer, the hard drive containing Project Glasshouse lay silent as an undetonated bomb. Nathan came home at 7:18 p.m., coat still damp from rain, hair slightly disheveled, wearing the tired expression of a decent, upstanding man. He kissed my cheek and said, "You made my favorite?" I looked at his lips, thought of room 614 at the Roby Hotel, thought of the 2 robes on the bill, and smiled in a way that made me want to vomit on the spot. But I kept my composure until the final moment. "I know you needed a peaceful dinner tonight." Lily came down to the kitchen 12 minutes later, wearing my ivory knit sweater. Not one like mine. It was mine. My favorite sweater. The one I had bought at Nordstrom on Michigan Avenue, size small, with a small frayed thread under the left arm. She pulled the sleeve past the back of her hand, climbed onto the kitchen stool, and asked in a voice as soft as melting cream, "Claire, can I help with anything?" I set the salad plate in front of her. "No need, you're a guest." I said the word guest very softly, but Lily still flinched for half a second. Nathan heard it and immediately spooned the most tender piece of meat from the pot onto Lily's plate, then turned to ask if I wanted more wine. That gesture was so quick, so natural, so intimate, that my stomach clenched as if squeezed by a cold hand. Eleanor video called at precisely 7:46 p.m., so precisely that I knew this was not a spontaneous call. Nathan propped his phone against the vase, and Lily immediately straightened her back and tucked her hair behind her ear, like a child waiting to be praised. Eleanor looked at the dinner table, at the dish, at me, then smiled. "Claire, you look softer tonight. Very good. Men need peace when they come home." I swallowed a piece of meat I hadn't yet finished chewing. It lodged in my throat like a burning stone. I wanted to tell her I had heard the family transition file, that I knew she'd called me an obstacle, that I understood every cutting remark she'd made was not a comment, but a calculated campaign to make me doubt myself. But I only raised my wine glass and said, "I'm learning to be calmer and more measured." After dinner, I rested my head on Nathan's shoulder on the sofa, while Lily sat across from us, both hands cradling her teacup like an innocent female lead in a film. I wanted her to see me still playing the role of the happy, oblivious wife. I wanted Eleanor, through the phone sitting on the table, to feel confident that the prey was still docile in its enclosure. And I wanted Nathan to relax just long enough to make more mistakes. When Nathan went to shower at 10:06 p.m., I turned his first mistake into my first advantage. His laptop sat open on the desk, screen locking after 10 minutes of inactivity. I inserted a small black USB into the left port, ran the folder cloning software I had prepared, and watched the progress bar crawl from 12% to 100% in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. My heart beat so hard I could hear my own blood in my ears, like the sound of shoes dragging across concrete. I didn't take everything. The greedy always leave traces. I only copied the Whitman Trust folder, emails containing the keywords Lily, transfer, postnup, and an Excel file named Asset Realignment Q4. When the sound of water in the bathroom stopped, I pulled out the USB, wiped my fingerprints with the hem of my nightgown, and repositioned the laptop at its exact original angle. Nathan stepped out 20 seconds later, hair wet, shirtless, still believing he was living with a woman easily lulled by a few kisses. That night, I lay beside him as I did every night. He wrapped his arm around my waist, his warm palm resting on my stomach, while I lay still as a breathing corpse. Each time he kissed my shoulder, my skin prickled as if ants were crawling beneath the flesh. I listened to his steady breathing, the ticking of the clock, the sound of the heating system cycling on beneath the floor. Everything was so normal, it was suffocating and revolting. The next morning, I made pancakes. I let Lily choose the playlist. I let Nathan kiss my forehead before leaving for work. I even texted Eleanor. "Thank you, Mom, for last night's reminder. I'll try to be softer." She replied exactly 3 minutes later, "I'm glad you finally come to understand." Then she turned away and laughed, as though my obliviousness was beyond all comprehension. I read that message and laughed, just a small, dry laugh. Eleanor thought she was taming me. Nathan thought I was returning to being the good wife. Lily thought she was settling into my chair, 1 inch at a time, 1 dinner at a time, 1 sweater at a time, as though everything that was mine was already hers. But they had all misread my position. I was no longer sitting at their table. I was standing outside the glass house, and I was choosing my first poisoned arrow. The asset realignment Q4 file made me understand that Eleanor's plan didn't end with pushing me out of the marriage. The spreadsheet had 6 tabs, but the last one chilled the back of my neck. LM Timeline. In it, Lily Mercer's name appeared beside each milestone marked in yellow. Move-in complete. Public acceptance. Claire fatigue. Soft exit. Not divorce. Not a breakup. But wearing Claire down until she left on her own. I stared at the phrase, Claire fatigue, for a long time. They wanted to erode me. Through every small disparaging remark, every dinner where I was subtly isolated, every inch Lily moved closer to Nathan than I was. They wanted me to snap first, cry first, scream first, so that when I broke down, they could look at everyone around them and say, "See, Claire was always this unstable." This was no longer infidelity. This was a campaign for a complete bloodless coup. In Lily's folder, I found an email Eleanor had sent her 7 months earlier. Subject line, "You must stop acting desperate." The body held only 4 lines. "If you want Claire's position, you must learn to stand still in the shadows. Men like Nathan don't choose demanding women. They choose the woman who makes them believe the decision was their own." Reading that, I saw clearly that Lily was not just a husband stealer. She was a student. Eleanor was the teacher. Then I noticed a name appearing 3 times throughout the email chain. Mara Vance. Eleanor had written, "Don't repeat the mistake with Mara. This time it must be cleaner." I searched for Mara on LinkedIn, Facebook, Cook County court records, and eventually discovered she was the former wife of Grant Mercer, an old business associate of Nathan's, and the person who had sponsored Lily when she first moved to Chicago. 5 years earlier, Lily had inserted herself into that marriage using the exact same formula. Vulnerable, grateful, harmless. And then, step by step, displaced the real wife. The final blow was an email Nathan sent to Eleanor at 2:06 a.m., just 3 weeks prior. He had written, "Did Mara actually sign the NDA? I don't want Claire finding out about the precedent." I read that sentence 3 times. Nathan knew. He knew what Lily had done before. He knew Eleanor had orchestrated it. He hadn't been swept into a storm. He had walked in, closed the door behind him, and asked his mother whether the previous woman had been silenced tightly enough. I messaged Mara from a new account with just 1 line. "Lily Mercer destroyed your life, didn't she?" She didn't respond immediately. At 1:13 a.m., my phone lit up. Mara's reply contained 8 words. She didn't destroy it alone. Eleanor helped. We met 2 days later at a small cafe on Milwaukee Avenue. Mara was around 36, black hair cut to her chin, eyes dark from years of insufficient sleep, but her voice was as sharp as the edge of broken glass. She placed a brown envelope on the table in front of me. Inside, screenshot printouts of messages, bank transfer records, a $25,000 silence agreement, and an audio recording that ran 6 minutes and 44 seconds. In that recording, Lily's voice was younger, but carried the same artificial sweetness. If Mara leaves on her own, no one has to be the villain. Then Eleanor's voice came from the background, composed to the point of illness. Exactly. The most intelligent woman is the one who makes the victim sign her own death warrant. Mara looked at me and said, "They didn't just take my husband. They took my credibility. When I reacted, they called me unhinged. When I went quiet, they called that proof I was in the wrong." I felt my hands trembling under the table, not from fear, because I was looking at a future version of myself, had I been a few weeks slower. Mara was not a stranger. Mara was my rough draft. The draft Eleanor had tested before rewriting me into something cleaner, more refined, more expensive. I showed Mara Project Glasshouse, the 3:14 a.m. message, the 47-second camera blackout, the Room 614 receipt, the family transition file, the asset realignment Q4 spreadsheet, and Nathan's email asking about her NDA. Mara was silent for nearly a minute. Then she asked, "Do you want a clean divorce, or do you want to make sure they can never do this to anyone again?" I thought of Lily wearing my sweater, of Nathan spooning her the most tender piece of meat, of Eleanor calling me an obstacle as casually as naming a piece of furniture that needed to be moved from the hallway. "I want their glass house to explode in front of as many people as possible," I said. Mara smiled for the first time, not warmly, not happily. It was the smile of someone who had been buried alive and just heard the sound of a shovel turning toward the one who dug the grave. She reached into her bag and placed a silver USB on the table. "Then you need this, a list of donors, internal emails from Harrison, Bell, and Rowe, and 3 people Eleanor has previously paid to stay silent." When I picked up that USB, everything inside me became quiet. Not peaceful. The quiet that precedes the demolition of a building. I was no longer alone. I now had the blueprints for a collapse. And the first event on those blueprints already had a date. My 10th wedding anniversary dinner. The event Eleanor had used to invite half the city in order to prove her family was perfect. 3 days after meeting Mara, I received an email from Eleanor. The subject line was elegant. "Anniversary guest list. Final review." She sent me the guest list for my and Nathan's 10th wedding anniversary celebration as though I was still the hostess of that evening. 137 people. Law firm partners, hospital donors, Whitman family relatives, Nathan's college friends, a few of my own friends, and my parents from Madison, Wisconsin. Eleanor had chosen the Langham Chicago herself, chosen the white peonies herself, chosen the menu herself, chosen the background music herself, and chosen Lily's champagne-colored dress herself on the grounds that it was the right tone for family photos. She didn't know she had just handed me the perfect stage. If I exposed them in the living room, they'd call me hysterical. If I sent a private email, they'd call their lawyers. But if the truth appeared before the very people they needed most to impress, they would have nowhere left to hide. Mara and I divided the plan into 3 layers. The first layer was irrefutable evidence, the video of Eleanor discussing my replacement, Nathan's email asking about Mara's NDA, the family transition file, the Room 614 receipt, and the asset realignment Q4 spreadsheet. The second layer was living witnesses, Mara, 2 women Eleanor had previously bought into silence, and a former assistant at Harrison, Bell, and Rowe who had seen Nathan use the secondary company card to pay for the hotel. The third layer was what would truly kill them, the timing of detonation. I had no intention of shouting, no intention of throwing a wine glass, no intention of slapping Lily in the middle of the banquet hall and becoming exactly what they had described, an unstable, jealous, uncontrollable woman. I would let Eleanor speak about family. I would let Nathan put his hand on my waist in front of the guests. I would let Lily sit below the stage in her replacement dress. And then I would turn on the screen. Mara assembled an 11-minute and 8-second video. No melodramatic music, no cheap effects. Only timestamps, data sources, screenshots, original audio, and white subtitles on a black background. Each piece of evidence was clearly labeled 3:14 a.m., 12:21, 38 a.m., Room 614, $308.60, Claire fatigue, soft exit. I wanted the entire room to understand. This was not jealousy. This was an indictment. But the plan nearly fell apart on Friday evening. Nathan walked into the study while I was reviewing the presentation file, the screen still displaying family transition, draft notes. My blood froze. I closed the laptop half a second slower than normal, and that half second was enough to make him furrow his brow. "What are you doing?" he asked. I turned, smiled, and said, "I'm putting together an anniversary video. I want to surprise your mother." He stared at me for 3 more seconds. Those 3 seconds stretched like a noose tightening around my neck. Then he smiled, stepped forward, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You're always such a perfectionist." I rested my forehead against his chest, listened to his heartbeat, and felt sick at how convincingly I was still performing. I no longer knew whether that was strength or whether the human part of me had already died. After that, Mara replaced the entire backup system. 1 copy of the video on my laptop, 1 on her silver USB, 1 scheduled to send by email at 8:42 p.m., exactly 3 minutes after Eleanor finished her speech. Recipients included my personal lawyer, Rebecca Sloan, the board of St. Augustine Hospital, the ethics department of Harrison, Bell & Rowe, 3 of Eleanor's major donors, and my parents. The day before the party, I stood before the mirror trying on the fitted black dress Eleanor had described as a bit severe for a wedding anniversary. I looked at my face in the mirror, calm to the point of strangeness. Eleanor wanted Lily in champagne, the color of a soft-spoken bride. I had chosen black, the color of a funeral. Not the funeral of the marriage I had lost, the funeral of the version of Claire who had once begged to be loved. That night, Nathan lay beside me and asked, "Are you happy? It's been 10 years." I placed my hand on his chest, felt the steady heartbeat beneath his skin, and said, "Happy. I think tomorrow night will be a night no one forgets." He fell asleep quickly. I stayed awake until 3:14 a.m., watching the clock change minutes in the dark, not from pain anymore, because the first poisoned arrow was already in my hands. And by morning, their glass house would begin to crack. The following evening, I walked into the Langham Chicago at 6:52 p.m. in the black dress Eleanor hated. The second-floor banquet hall was draped in white peonies, crystal candles, cream-colored table linens, and expensive smiles. Eleanor stood near the entrance, wearing a triple strand of pearls, champagne glass in hand, introducing me to guests as though I were still the perfect daughter-in-law displayed in the Whitman family collection. Nathan placed his hand on my waist as we posed in front of the anniversary backdrop. That hand had once made me feel safe. Tonight, it felt like a temporary rope tied loosely around a bomb. Lily stood 3 steps away in her champagne satin dress, hair softly curled, lips a pale pink, her eyes always finding Nathan before they found the camera. 10 minutes before the speech, the plan nearly unraveled. A hotel technician approached me and said Eleanor wanted to do one final review of the family photo slideshow. The blood in my ears roared. If she saw the Project Glasshouse file, everything would end before it began. I smiled, placed my hand on his arm, and said, "That won't be necessary." Mrs. Whitman wanted to be surprised. "Just play the file I sent at 5:18 p.m. He hesitated. Nathan was standing less than 4 meters away, watching us. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated softly. Mara's text. Technician confirmed. Backup ready. I exhaled very slowly. The noose had eased by 1 inch. I smiled through the entire dinner. I cut the cake. I raised my glass. I let Eleanor take my hand in front of the guests and say, "Claire has been an important part of this family for the past 10 years. The word important fell from her lips as lightly as ash. I looked at that hand. The hand that had written the words, "the obstacle." The hand that had taught Lily to stand in the shadows. The hand that had purchased Mara's silence for $25,000. At 8:39 p.m., Eleanor stepped onto the stage. She spoke of marriage, patience, sacrifice, and family honor. Her voice was soft, polished, warm enough for the donors to nod along. Nathan stood beside me, his eyes glistening with manufactured emotion, as his mother said, "A strong family is not defined by the absence of hardship, but by choosing each other every single day." I nearly laughed out loud. They hadn't chosen me every day. They had chosen every single second to erase me. At exactly 8:42 p.m., my phone vibrated once in my clutch. Mara's text held only 2 words, "Sent now." The emails were gone. The evidence had reached my lawyer, the hospital board, the ethics department of Harrison, Bell and Rowe, 3 of Eleanor's major donors, and my parents. There was no going back. There was no way out. I set down my champagne glass, stepped onto the stage, and gently took the microphone from Eleanor's hands. "Thank you, Mom," I said. Eleanor stiffened, just for one beat, just one, but I saw it. Nathan saw it. Lily saw it too. I turned to face the guests. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of 10 years of marriage between Nathan and me, but in reality, this is the night I want to thank the Whitman family for the lesson they have taught me. I pressed the remote in my hand. The screen behind me shifted from wedding photos to black. The first line of white text appeared. Project Glass House. Source files verified. A murmur spread through the room like fire catching on a curtain. The video began with Eleanor's 3:14 a.m. text. She's an obstacle, but still useful until the property paperwork is finalized. Then Nathan's email. Did Mara actually sign the NDA? I don't want Claire finding out about the precedent. Then the asset realignment Q4 spreadsheet appeared, with the rows reading Claire fatigue, soft exit. I added not a single word. I let them confess in their own voices, their own emails, their own data. When the audio from Family Transition played, Nathan's face went from white to gray. Lily shot to her feet. Eleanor promised me everything would be handled cleanly, she blurted, her voice splitting in two. The entire room turned to look at her. Lily realized what she had just said, raised her hand to cover her mouth, but it was too late. A defense is sometimes a confession when it falls at exactly the right moment. Immediately after, Mara appeared at the entrance to the hall alongside 2 other women. No drama, no shouting. Just 3 living witnesses. 3 faces that had each been ground beneath the same machine. Eleanor saw Mara and, for the first time in her life, the composed veneer cracked. She raised her hand to her pearl necklace as though it could shield her from the truth. The video cut to the receipt from the Roby Hotel. Room 614, $308.60. At table 6, Richard Bell, one of Nathan's senior partners, stood up, phone in hand, having just received the email. He looked directly at Nathan and asked, "Which department does the secondary company card belong to, Nathan?" Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came forward. And in that silence, his career began to fall off him like a suit whose stitching had just been cut. At the table nearest the stage, my father stood up, his face flushed crimson. But my mother held his hand back. She didn't look at Nathan. She looked at me. And for the first time in many weeks, what I saw in her eyes was not pity. It was recognition. Lily attempted, "It's not what everyone thinks." But the sentence died the moment the screen displayed the cropped wedding photo, the one where she had cut me out of my own wedding day. The entire room saw how she had erased me from the frame. No one needed an explanation anymore. A replacement only holds power when the real wife is kept hidden in the dark. Eleanor grabbed the microphone from my hand, but the audio had already been switched off by the technician at Mara's prior request. She opened her mouth, but there was no sound. All her life, she had used her voice to control people, and in the most important moment of all, she was left as nothing more than a silent, trembling mouth beneath the stage lights. I stepped down and walked past Nathan. He grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Claire, please, we can talk privately." I looked at his hand on my skin, then peeled each finger away. "You had 7 weeks to tell me the truth," I replied. "Tonight is the gift I've prepared for you." The following morning, Nathan was placed on internal suspension at Harrison, Bell and Rowe for misuse of the company card and concealment of an ethical conflict. Eleanor was asked to step down from the St. Augustine fundraising board pending investigation. 3 major donors withdrew their names from her spring gala. Lily deleted her Instagram, vacated her River North apartment, and for the first time in 3 years, no one called her poor thing. And me? I did not shatter their glass house. I simply pulled back the curtains so everyone could admire the true face of this family together. And so the entire city could see what had been rotting inside. 3 weeks after the evening at the Langham, I moved out of the Evanston house. I didn't take the wedding crystal engraved with my name and Nathan's. Didn't take the set of napkins Eleanor had once dismissed as too modern. Didn't take the ivory knit sweater Lily had worn, as though she could slip into my skin and become me. I took only my clothes, my legal documents, the hard drive containing Project Glasshouse, and the woman I had been forced to become. Nathan sent me 37 messages in the first week. The first was an apology. The 12th was an explanation. The 21st blamed me for destroying his career. The final message contained just one sentence. "You've become a very cruel person, Claire." I read that line for a long time, then laughed. The person who stabs you almost always resents you most when you pull out the knife and lay it on the table for everyone to see. I didn't respond. Not because I was noble. I'm not that noble. I didn't respond because my silence hurt him more than any insult could. Nathan was accustomed to me explaining myself, arguing, trying to fix things, trying to understand, trying to save us. Now he had only a blank screen. For a man who had lived by his ability to control the narrative, losing his audience was the most humiliating punishment of all. Eleanor attempted to salvage her reputation with a small charity luncheon in Lake Forest. No one important attended. A former donor sent flowers but didn't appear. Her two closest friends called in sick on the same day. I heard this from Mara, and for the first time, I felt no loud satisfaction, only a very clean silence. Some people don't need to be pushed off a cliff. You simply take away the light, and they discover on their own that they never learned to stand alone. Lily left Chicago a month later. Some said she went back to Kentucky. Others said she moved to Nashville and changed her surname on social media. I didn't look. I didn't need to. She had wanted my position, my kitchen, my husband, my family photos. In the end, the only thing she received was the lesson that a champagne dress does not transform a replacement into a bride. I signed the divorce papers in Rebecca Sloane's office on a lightly raining morning. The pen glided across the page smoothly, almost tenderly. I had expected to cry when I saw my name separated from Nathan's, but I only felt my shoulders lighten, as if someone had just unclasped from around my neck a beautiful necklace that had been clasped too long. Rebecca asked if I was all right. I said, "No, but I'm free." I want to say that after everything, I found forgiveness, that I drank chamomile tea, meditated each morning, and sent light and peace to those who had betrayed me. But that is the kind of clean ending reserved for women who have been wounded and are expected to become gentler in order to be more lovable. The truth is, I did not forgive in the way they hoped. I did not cradle the wound and call it a sacred lesson. I called it what it was, a failed assassination of the spirit. That ordeal killed the most naive part of me, the part that once believed that if I were good enough, others would not bring themselves to hurt me. The part that once thought family was a safe place simply because people shared a table. The part that once bowed before insults wrapped in silk and velvet. The part that died somewhere between a bath towel smelling of peony and blush suede and a black screen displaying the words, Project Glass House. I did not try to resurrect it. I gave it a proper burial. The woman who lived on afterward was colder, more deliberate, harder to buy. I read documents before signing them. I trust actions over tears. I no longer let anyone call my endurance a virtue. And when someone tries to turn my kindness into a cage, I recognize the smell of iron bars very quickly. 6 months later, I opened my own design studio in the West Loop. On the wall behind my desk, I hung a single empty black frame. No one understood what it meant. But I did. It was the place reserved for every version of me that others had tried to crop out of the picture. Now that frame belongs to me. I decide who steps inside it, who must remain outside, and who will be deleted permanently. Mara and I still talk. Not often, but enough. There are people who enter your life not to heal you with gentle words, but to hand you the evidence, a silver USB, and remind you that anger is sometimes the soul's last line of defense. I am grateful to her for that. Not a soft gratitude, the gratitude of two survivors who realize they are no longer lying beneath the ground. I don't pretend I'm completely fine. There are still nights when I startle at the scent of peony and blush suede in an elevator. There are still mornings when a phone notification makes my heart beat faster than it should. Psychological scars don't vanish just because you won. They only learn to lie quieter beneath the skin. But I am alive. I work. I laugh again. I wear black when I want, white when I want, and I never again let anyone decide which color makes me softer. I am no longer the woman standing in the kitchen, cooking a peaceful dinner for those who were busy burying her. I am the woman who stepped out of the glass house before it shattered, hands clean, back straight, eyes open. If that places me in my villain era, then so be it. I would rather be the villain in the story of those who exploited me than continue being the compliant victim in a rotten, decaying family. My survival is the first act of revenge. My happiness is the last. I am a woman with beauty, with a career, with financial independence. I could not accept a life built on deception inside a rotten family like this. I had to live for myself, and for the child growing inside me, whom I had kept hidden from his family, quietly nurturing, determined to raise into someone good.